I'm Jason. I work for Fivecast. We're a startup. We're a tech startup based right here in Adelaide. In fact, if there weren't the curtains here, I could probably see my office from here. And we also have an established presence in the US. So, as a company, our focus is on providing world-leading digital intelligence solutions. And right now, our tools are helping some of the world's most important public and private organizations explore masses of data, uncover actionable insights, and protect global communities. Now, today, I'm talking about OSINT for understanding influence operations. So, that's open source intelligence, which for those unfamiliar, simply put, it's any intel that we can gather from the open internet. So it's social media, deep web, dark web, etc. And over the next, over the course of this talk, I'll talk a bit about the importance of understanding online narratives, including how adversarial entities may attempt to manipulate them via influence operations. I'll talk about the challenges inherent in using data from the surface, the deep, the dark web, to monitor and analyze these online conversations. And we'll finish with some of the application of advanced OSINT technology for understanding influence operations. Now, I've said influence here, but let's get a grip on what's being influenced. And what I mean is we're influencing public opinion. Here's some examples of public opinion. When you view public opinion, especially online, you can think of it kind of as it's an emergent property of all the online collective conversations and media campaigns occurring at any one point. So as such, it can be messy, it can be contradictory, it can even be unsettling. And the fun thing is that it's susceptible to social influence. And this is particularly as a response to the perceived behaviors of others, and especially perceived peers. And I'm using the word perceived here because we're online. It's often unclear when the actions and opinions that we witness are genuine and when they're a manipulation. But however we take this, under the right conditions, this type of influence is powerful enough to turn the tide of public opinion. And so this brings us onto influence operations. This is a pretty standard, I think, definition of an influence operation. So it's a coordinated campaign to impact one or more specific aspects of politics or public consensus through media channels, including social media, by producing content designed to appear indigenous to the target audience. And I'd just like to draw attention to the first point there, the coordination. In my mind, it's probably the biggest thing of the four. A term that you may see bandied about in relation to influence operations is coordinated inauthentic behavior. And the point is that when you've got evidence of coordinated behaviors, particularly inauthentic ones, and this inauthenticity, that fourth point there, this deception to make your message seem more indigenous, that's an inauthentic behavior. But evidence of this coordination can help really differentiate between what is an influence operation and what's a genuine movement. So getting onto the propagation of dangerous content, there are three broad categories that we see talks about. On the left, we have perhaps the most benign. It's not super benign. It does pollute the conversation nonetheless. It's misinformation. So this is misleading. This is wrong, but posted in good faith. The people involved in this, we would say that they're unwitting actors, unwitting proxies. Moving on, more insidious, is disinformation. So like misinformation, this is misleading info. But in this case, we're talking about primary actors, and we're talking about witting proxies who are knowingly lying. And finally, we have malinformation, which in some ways is a misnomer. It's not really information at all. It's trolling and it's abuse. Now, whatever form the dangerous content takes, it can damage a target if traction is gained beyond the influence operation itself. On this slide, we're just looking at a few trends in influence operations. There's a few research groups studying this. There's quite a lot of research groups studying this, and you get similar trends coming out. So year on year, number of influence operations, they're increasing. This plot on the left, the descent in 2018 and 19, that's just a delay in, that's an artifact of reporting delays. Whereas the one on the right, that's from a Facebook report, and they're using their own data. You can see it's much more clear that it's still increasing in terms of in terms of number. Something else that we see is that Russia, to pick on Russia again, via their Internet Research Agency, has been and remains the biggest player out there. But again, looking at this this world map here, we can see that it's becoming more of a global sport. And finally, we often talk about foreign influence operations, but in reality, you get a similar rate of foreign and domestic influence operations. And by domestic, I mean that's the state operating against its own people. Now, this is a pretty pertinent quote. So, a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. Sometimes attributed to Mark Twain, which is ironic since it's not from Mark Twain. Sometimes Winston Churchill, also a misattribution. I think it's Jonathan Swift, but don't quote me on that because it's actually pretty unclear. Anyway, whoever said it, and I've just said it, it's a fitting description of how the diffusion of news stories and particularly fake news goes over social media. There was a fairly recent MIT study which looked at, they compared bots and they compared humans and how they worked to propagate truth and fiction across the internet. A little surprising. Bots were pretty even-handed, whereas humans, possibly latching onto novelty, latching onto scandal, were far more. They disseminated fake news at a far higher rate. First within echo chambers and then into the wider community. Now, here we have a diagram to capture the spirit of this diffusion and amplification of, well, if it goes through the whole thing, that's a successful influence operation. We'll start at the content creation. We tend to see here a lot of recycling and a lot of plagiarism. This is obviously, it saves time, it saves resources. But what you're also getting, especially from the plagiarism, is messaging which can look much more indigenous. It can hide your own lack of ability in mimicking your target audience by just taking their messages from them. And then this content is shared across social media. Now, most influence operations, they kind of fail here. They just add noise to the online discourse. They don't really get very far into this. But those that do, they have a tendency to, the messages start bouncing around. They get honed, they get refined within echo chambers, within they're sometimes called nests, before breaking out into the wider social media world. And then when you've got that far, the likelihood increases that you'll get an influencer or some accepted mainstream online community, or even the print media, picking up the conversation. And at this point, you'd say that you've got some good traction in this campaign. So when you've got a big enough, or indeed a lucky enough push, then we can see influence operations spilling out into the real world. And sometimes, as famously happened in the United States back in January with the Capitol riots, there can be dire consequences. Now, bots is a thing that we talk about. And historically, bots, which I'm saying are automated accounts, and trolls, which are people acting anonymously, have been very effective at amplifying messages and helping campaigns go viral. Now, they've been, like, they are very common. Like the influence operations database, they have detected bots in about half of all of their operations. And in the 2016 US presidential elections, it's documented that bots reached a position of measurable influence. However, the fallout from that particular operation was so strong that it has resulted in a widespread heightened awareness of that threat, to the point where, here we are. So in targeting the 2020 election, Russia-linked covert accounts did not achieve any significant traction with the targeted communities. So while we had Russian botnets and Russian troll farms active in both 2016 and 2020, in the former, we'd say that they were important players, but come the latter, no, not so much. And in fact, in 2020, the real super spreaders, as it were, of disinformation were verified accounts. So influencers who made no attempt to disguise their identities, while where we did see bot and troll activity gaining success, it tended to be restricted to nascent and marginal campaigns. Now, I'm going to spend the rest of this now talking about some of the tools that we can use. Yeah, I'll start with why would we use OSINT over just having analysts sitting at computers searching the internet on their own? So first of all, it gives us flexibility. Now, we're saying that social media is a useful proxy for real-time public opinion. And OSINT gives us the flexibility to ask and refine complex questions even once an investigation is underway. It lets us follow specific actors or groups of interest. It lets us track trends. This flexibility, this specificity, this ability to track, it differs a little from what we would have in the traditional methods for measuring public opinion. These are things like polls, sample surveys, focus groups. So now we can, we're not just looking at demographics, we're not just looking at things where you're defining the question up front and you've possibly got some delays. With OSINT, you can do real-time analyses. Now, of course, there are downsides, and it's not a like-for-like replacement for what's come before. But in situations which are fast-moving, which are like influence operations, it's the right tool for the job. OSINT also gives us scalability. Now, I don't think it's controversial to say that there's a huge amount of mainly unstructured data that we need to sift through. It's messy, there are overlapping conversations, sometimes going cross-platform, heterogeneous messages, and an ever-changing social media landscape. Now, on this point of heterogeneous messages, depending on what you're trying to do, a valid message can be anything from a structured essay, something like a manifesto, a video, an image, just some short piece of text or a simple reply, a meme, an emoji, a thumbs up, a like anything in between. So with OSINT, we get, OSINT gives us some smart automated solutions, which can really help analysts follow topics, follow conversations, and interrogate networks. Now, here's an example of some of the things that you can do content analysis-wise. Yeah, just going through here. Down at the bottom, we can see we can do text analysis, some NLP, pulling up things like sentiment and emotion, looking at topics. So are people talking about things that we're interested in? Beyond the text, there's images. Images are also very important, and image analysis it's a pretty mature field. So we can see that you can detect a tank in there, you can detect guns in the other one. In that picture of the tank, there's also some text embedded in the image, and you can use things like OCR to bring those out and then analyze them as text. And it's all all of this has been really driven by what we call in deep learning or AI, and it's come a long way. With content analysis, you can you can then start thinking about trend analysis. Yeah. It lets you track behavior, lets you get a much more nuanced feel for how the behavior of individuals and groups change over time. I've shown sentiment and emotion up here, but anything that you can measure, you can do a trend analysis for. So it's engagement with topics, change in the degree of your level of influence within a network. So it's really anything that you can think of. And then we come on to network analysis. So this is great for looking at both behavior and coordination. Once you've got your data represented like this, you've got the power to start looking at information flows. You can say, you can ask who are the influencers. Depending on what kind of model you're using, you can do some really nuanced things like looking at the network. Where are the pinch points? Who should I be targeting in order to best disrupt this influence operation? All right, so that's some techniques. There's a whole bunch of open source solutions for anyone interested in this. That first one is pronounced awesome. I disagree with the pronunciation, but it's just how it is. They have lots of really good tools, and the two that I've shown up there, Botometer and Hoaxy, great Twitter and analytic tools. The first one, it's a bot detector, and the second one, it's a really nice visualization for looking at information flows over Twitter, so seeing how messages propagate. Below that, I've got the DFR lab, the Digital Forensics Research Lab. Again, fantastic resource. They've got lots of stuff in this space. I'm highlighting the foreign influence attributes tracker. It's a widget, and then below that we have something for the data scientists. It's NLP libraries. All right, so that's me talking about OSINT. I'd like to just finish by saying that I've talked about technical stuff, and you can't think that the technical stuff is the solution in and of itself. There are lots of other things that you need to consider here. So expert intel, that's still a very important part. Education, so making users more savvy, making them more resilient to these campaigns. And then also deterrence, so platforms banning, maybe some policy things. All right, so in sum, I am over time here, but there are great tools out there. There are great tools being developed, and yeah, we can use them to great effect, but just remember that tools on their own won't fix the problem. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk. I'll open the floor for questions. This is Jessica.
Thank you. I'm Jessica Borges from the University of Adelaide. So I'm a civil engineer, so a little bit from a different industry. But I guess my question is, the idea behind understanding these networks and understanding how these bots and fake news and all of that propagate is to analyze past occurrences of that, or like to look at how to stop them in the future. And if it is how to stop them in the future, I guess my question is, how do you do that? Like, if you can understand and you see how that misinformation is flowing in Twitter or whatever, how do you stop it? Like, I'm just curious about how do you do that?
All right. So thanks for that question, Jessica. Short answer is, it's like right now you can't. Like, it's very difficult to stop it. There are definitely steps being taken by the social media platforms. Facebook released their threat intel report just over a month ago now. Some steps that they're taking, which they look quite encouraging, is taking an adversarial approach. So they have their own. They've got a red team that will try to push influence operations as they think that they might be able to exploit it, and it's up to the blue team to build guards against that. There are some more abstract models of how these influence operations grow. I know there's work from George Washington University where they model it as a as a kind of bubble forming process. So something that they call gelation, where what they hypothesized there was that you can go into if you've got a good view of the network, you can pick people, like not necessarily the big guys. It's like you take like 10% of the group at random, and you ban them or you shadow ban them, and they can no longer contribute, and you really control the rate at which these things can expand. So yeah, there are lots of ways of attacking it, but obviously right now there's no perfect solution.